When I was a little kid, the two things I loved most in life were Godzilla and NES games. So, naturally, when Godzilla Monster of Monsters came out, it was like a dream come true. Well, almost. To sum it up, most of the game revolved around getting through very repetitive outer space levels while smashing up tanks and jets and then fighting against Godzilla's monster enemies. Overall, it was pretty mediocre, but back then I didn't care. When I got the game as a present for my 10th birthday, I played it night and day, as much as I could. Unfortunately, I had traded the game for Amagon for a year later, much to my regret when I found out what the game was like. Recently, I'd bought a new NES system, and through a lot of hunting and asking around, my friend Billy had finally managed to find a copy of Godzilla Monster of Monsters. I was pumped to play my favorite childhood game. It never even occurred to me to ask where Billy found it. He also gave me some other games like Legend of Zelda, Bomberman, and some stupid thing called Action 52, but Godzilla had to come first. So I started the game, and the nostalgia came flooding back like a tidal wave. Godzilla's 8-bit theme song flooded proudly through the speakers, and soon I was grinning like an idiot. Some people laugh at me for playing such outdated games, but I've never had as much enjoyment for any games other than those on the NES. Those 8-bit games take me back to when things were simpler, more safe. But after what's happened with this game, I don't have these feelings anymore. I had forgotten how quick the fun of smashing things as Godzilla wore off in the scrolling levels. The game bombards you with bullets and things crashing at you from every direction, and you're too big to avoid most of them. Although my excitement had worn down some, it wasn't long at all before I got to my first boss battle. My first opponent was Gizora, an obscure squid kaiju who had never been in a Godzilla movie. The most annoying thing about fighting Gizora is that he always backs you into a corner and starts smacking you with his tentacle, and you're unable to move until he gets off you. This move doesn't do any damage, but it can stall you until the timer runs out and you have to start the fight over. And he regains some health. It's as annoying as it sounds. Of course, he did it when I fought him. Only for some reason this caused the game to glitch up. Because once he started smacking me, he never stopped. The timer is supposed to end the fight in 40 seconds, but this lasted for nearly 5 minutes. After a while, the graphics started to mess up with little red blocks all over the place. Which was weird, but I just took the game out, blew on it, and then started again. I wasn't about to let a little glitch stand in my way. So I started again, and I defeated Gizora, and this time the level's other boss monster, Maguera, without any problems. So it was on the next planet, Mars. I browsed around the board and found something unexpected. Where Varan's piece should have been, there was instead a piece representing Titanosaurus. There were only 10 kaiju in the game, and Titanosaurus was not one of them. Or so I thought. Perhaps Titanosaurus was originally intended to be in the game, but was swapped out for Varan for some reason. I began to feel very excited. Not only was I playing my favorite game, but I was playing a prototype of some kind with a new monster. Needless to say, I ran through the levels as fast as I could to see Titanosaurus in action. Fought Gizora again and beat him before he could do his tentacle smack, but this time the glitch started happening when he died. Gizora's sprite didn't sink to the bottom, but instead seemed to be devoured by the glitch, and his eyes started randomly spawning all over the screen. I now know that these glitches with Gizora were my first warning sign that something was very wrong with this game. But I foolishly ignored it and proceeded to fight Maguera, who this time had a glitch of his own. Maguera was twice the size of what he should have been, which startled me. He was also considerably harder to beat than usual, which is to say, not at all. But soon I had defeated him also, and when he died, yet another glitch happened. This happened extremely fast, so I was lucky to get a screen cap of it all, but what happened was that the giant Maguera sprite started to shatter and melt. And if you look at the garbled text in the right corner of the screen, you'll notice that what appears to be a bird in a cage, I still have no idea what that meant. At this point, I was about to fight Titanosaurus, and I was worried about what kind of glitches would happen this time. But as to my surprise, Titanosaurus looked just fine, although all the game's bipedal monsters were the same height. Titanosaurus was a bit taller. But since Titanosaurus was actually taller than Godzilla in his film debut, I thought this was kind of cool. After a very fun fight with a monster that wasn't supposed to be in the game, I took over the enemy base and proceeded not to Jupiter like normal, but instead to Pathos. Chapter 2, Pathos. Pathos was the same as Jupiter in layout, except the board was dark blue rather than green. The first thing I noticed was that all the usual level icons had been replaced by a blue rock in some kind of orange honeycomb shape. There was one icon that had part of the jungle icon shape, but I didn't pay much thought to it. I checked on the other side of the board to see the new monster. Instead of Hedorah, it was Biolante. That couldn't have been right. Godzilla vs. Biolante didn't come out until 1989, and this game was made 1988. Perhaps Toho put Biolante in the game to build excitement for the movie next year, but changed their minds? I tried to rationalize the game's abnormalities any way I could, but this would prove to be futile. Pathos's map song was the first new song I heard in the game. Like most of the new songs, it was hard to describe, but I'll try. It started out slow, suspenseful, much slower than any song in the game. But every 12 seconds or so, there would be this loud clashing sound, and the tempo changed. It was like the composer randomly played parts from five different songs with the same instruments. I moved Godzilla over to one of the many blue rock icons that had replaced the jungle icons and started the level. The level resembled a blue mountain range with a blood-red planet in the sky, but there was something odd about the mountains. They had this shredded paper look to them. I thought first maybe the glitch had affected it, but it seemed far too intentional. I quickly noticed something about this new level. There were no enemies at all. There weren't even any obstacles. I should mention this was where the point meter started to become glitched beyond comprehension, but this didn't bother me much. I never keep up with game points. So without having to focus on anything, I listened to the music while walking through the level unopposed. This music had a sorrowful feel to it. It would have been rather pleasant. Oh shit. Well, that's a great character, guys. Sorry, I am playing downstairs. Um, sorry about that. All right, let's go back into this. So without having to focus on anything, I listened to the music while walking through the level unopposed. The music had a sorrowful feel to it. It would have been rather pleasant had I heard it in a normal game. The level went on for 3 screens, but with no obstacles around, so I finished it very quickly. I tried other levels of the same type to see if any enemies appear, but there were none. There were little else to be seen in the Blue Mountains, so I tried the other level type. I started with one of the orange levels, and my eyes were assaulted with this grotesque background of tumultuous orange eyes. The sky was the same as the ground, so I assumed the game was indicating that this level takes place in a cave. The only enemies here were Matango spawn, but as you can see, the little bastards were everywhere. The music certainly didn't help, with a mixture of screeching sounds and loud drum beats that sounded like the monsters theme in a horror film. After completing it, I tried to avoid playing through any more of these levels whenever I could. This map was so short that it only took a few seconds before I was headed with the rematch with Gazora and Muguera. But this time, their sprites and attack patterns were vastly different. I fought Muguera first. Muguera's replacement with this was a flying machine with a slight resemblance to a Pascagoula alien. It was a bit like fighting Mothra, only it moved with a lot more grace. It attacked by spinning its front tentacle like a corkscrew, and it still had an eye beam, except now it fired from the drill. This lanky aberration to replace Gazora, and this new beast was more of a challenge. It would run and jump at a fast pace, constantly swinging its arms around, making it hard to get close, and, of course, it tried to pin me in the corner with such annoying resolve as ever. I defeated it using a combination of tail whips and heat beam spamming. I defeated them and was going to fight Titanosaurus, but when I started the fight, Titanosaurus was nowhere to be seen, and the game simply went back to the map with the Titanosaurus piece now missing. There's no one left to fight now but Biolante, so I eagerly started the battle. I was quite surprised that Biolante started the fight in her rose form. She was immobile and used tentacles to keep me away from the main body, which took the most damage. As expected, she turned into her final form after taking enough damage. The sprite looked pretty damn good for an 8-bit. This battle technique was the same, except now Biolante could move, albeit slower than any other monster. Being hit by the tentacles did more damage now, and Biolante could do an acid spit, which I managed to avoid by jumping in the screen cap. Not much more difficult to beat than Titanosaurus, it only took 2 rounds. But when Biolante was gone, the music had stopped, and there was a new icon replacing the bass. That icon wasn't there when I beat Biolante. It resembled a red tribal mask, and I had a feeling of dread when I saw it. But since it replaced the base, it must be the only way to exit Pathos. I moved Godzilla to the square and started the level. Run. It was a hellish looking place with no sky and a flickering fire in the background. Fire looked far too advanced than anything I'd seen on the NES. There was music in the form of a slow, steady drum sound resembling a heartbeat. All the text at the top of the screen and the life bar were gone, and in their place was a single bit of text in the middle of the screen that said "Run." My feeling of dread had intensified. I cautiously walked through the level, but like the Blue Mountains, there were no enemies. I paced around for a minute before thinking, run from what? The first time it hit me, I didn't even see it. I heard a noise from outside my room and turned back to see if something fell. And I looked back, Godzilla was dying. I figured it must have been a glitch, but I wasn't going to play through the game without Godzilla. So I restarted the game and went back to the password screen. Have I ever mentioned how creepy the password screen music is? If you've played the game, you know what I mean. It doesn't fit at all the mood of the game. It's more like something from a horror game. Maybe they made it like so kids wouldn't cheat. I was quite annoyed at this point because I thought I was going to have to fight all the monsters again, but that didn't happen. The game started to rip me off right where I was before I started the red face level. So I tried again, making sure to pay attention this time. That's when I heard a low bellowing sound. And that's when I saw it. This thing. You know that feeling when your body has when you feel like you're in extreme danger. You start to recoil and tense up and the adrenaline flows through your veins as your nerves start to feel very cold. That's the feeling I had when I took this screen cap. I haven't seen all the Godzilla movies, but I'm pretty sure this was never in any of them. It looks like it had to be something the creators made up. What kind of sick fuck would put this in a children's game? By sheer dumb luck, or perhaps the adrenaline boost, I managed to run fast enough to get away from it. We ran very fast, and so much that if you saw it, you're almost certainly going to die. When I say die, I meant your monster gets killed instantly when the creature touches them. Once I had gone back to the map, I was so afraid that I was extremely tempted to just shut the game off, pretend this never happened. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It couldn't have been real. And even if I wanted to continue, I still had to get Mothra through this chase level. But as I stayed inactive on the map screen for a few minutes, my fear was replaced by burning curiosity. What the hell had just happened? What was the rest of the game like? I had only had to beat this level with Mothra and it was off to the next world. But when I moved Mothra to the red face, the game registered it as me beating the level. I was quite relieved. I tried to prepare myself for the next world, Trance. I was still pretty shook up from the last level when I started Trance. Trance's map music did nothing to ease the tension. As for how to describe it, have you ever heard the theme from Videodrome? That's the closest thing I could think to compare it to. I could check to see who the new monster was, and it was Orga, a monster who didn't make his film debut until 2000, appearing in a game made in 1988. So much for my theories about Titanosaurus and Biolante. There's no way this game was made in 1988. Those guys at Toho might have been smart, but I'm sure they couldn't see that far into the future. Of course, if they could, they would never have given Roland Emmerich the rights to make a Godzilla movie. No, this had to be a hack of some kind, which just opened up even more questions. Who made this hack? When? How? And most importantly, why? The why was the question that bothered me the most. My immediate assumption was to think that Billy did this to pull a joke on me, but that couldn't be right either. Billy didn't know how to make a ROM hack, and if he did, he'd probably just do something simple and stupid like placing on the monsters with crudely drawn genitalia. Unless Billy had some amazing game editing skills and a serious dark streak to his imagination he never told me about, he couldn't have made this. Is it even possible to put a hacked ROM into a cartridge? Aside from all that, my eye was drawn to a new icon on the map, a question mark. I was really curious about as to what it did. I'm sure you're also curious, so I'll explain the quiz levels now, since this is when they start appearing. There was one of these per map from here on, and they always appeared near the start of the map. When you start on the quiz level, you appear a screen like this. Do you like dogs? Yes and no. As you can see, there's a question on top and a yes and no button and an emoticon in the center. I refer to the emoticon as face. Real creative, I know. And for convenience, I'll refer to face as the one asking the questions. The music for the quiz levels was a track actually in the game. It's the one that plays when you try to use the Ghidorah cheat and get sent to an unplayable level. Face asks you 12 yes or no questions, and you move your monster to the buttons for your answer. When you answer, the question disappears, and Face changes expressions for about 8 seconds. Then it goes back to neutral, and a new question comes up. There was no time limit, nor any right or wrong answers. Face has no respect for the player's personal boundaries, and will sometimes ask deeply disturbing and personal questions. For example, do you like hurting people? Have you ever killed or raped anyone? Have you been molested by a family member? Other times he would ask questions that were either mind-numbingly stupid. Is the sun hot? Is water wet? Or just flat out ridiculous? Does your dog like the president? And maybe once per quiz, Face would ask you a question about the game. With one exception, Face's expression changes. Face's expression changes seem to have no effect on the game, except for indicating what the game creator thought of your answer. His reactions rarely made any sense, and at first I thought they were randomly generated. The questions never followed a pattern. Face never stayed on the same subject for more than 2 questions. Early on, there were questions that made me think Face was building up to something, only then to ask some stupid garbage. Here's some of the expressions the Face that I saw while playing. I'll separate them into 2 categories: the expressions I understood and the expressions I didn't. First was the expressions I understood. Neutral, his default expression. Angry, if you try to attack Face, his expression changes to this, but nothing else happened. Sad, happy, sick, maniacal. Face made this expression when he was being an asshole. We'll see what I mean later. Surprised, love, annoyed, confused, and guilty or hurt. And here are the others. Two of these only appeared once, numbers 1 and 2, and I suspected they might have been in-jokes from the creator. The respective questions were, do you like ice cream, and are you a tough guy? As for the questions in the first quiz, luckily I had a notepad and pen handy. I had problems remembering things, so I'll often carry one to jot down notes, and sometimes I doodle in it when I'm bored. So when the first quiz started, I thought I'd record what happened. I'm glad I did. Here are the first series of questions, my answers, and Face's reaction. Do you like the game? Answer yes, reaction happy. Are you afraid? Answer yes, reaction surprised. Are you over 18? Answer yes, reaction weird face. Do birds have teeth? Answer no, reaction love. Is peanut butter good? Answer no, reaction sick. This guy is wrong. I'm sorry I had to break character, this guy is wrong. Does the moon rotate? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 11. Have you had a job? Answer yes, reaction confused. Do you like hurting people? Answer no, reaction annoyed. Is the sun hot? Answer yes, reaction sad. Do you like dogs? Answer yes, reaction happy. Is the president good? Answer yes, reaction weird face. Does your dog like the president? Answer no, reaction angry. And now that I've explained all that, time for the gameplay. After the quiz level, I tried the new green temple icon first. Wow, maybe this was why the game was so weird. Maybe one of the designers was drugged out of his mind. Jokes aside, I was quite impressed by the graphics of the level, as disorienting as they were, but I hate those creepy, blank staring statue faces. This music had a hypnotic Indian techno vibe to it. There were two new enemies to this level, a flying ghost type with a trunk, and a bat with a horse skull for a face. They appear at random, but I was lucky to get a screen cap of them both. Then I proceeded to a Blue Mountain level, expecting another nice calm stroll. I took my time walking through, and was completely taken by surprise when this happened. Not Maguera came speeding towards me and it took off quite a bit of my health with his tentacle screws. Took me only 2 minutes to kill him without having to worry about a time limit, but the boss monsters never showed up in the scrolling levels of the normal game. I was worried about other rules this game would break. After another Blue Mountain range, it was time to fight Nut Varan, whose replacement was one of the most bizarre things in the game. This strange creature attacks you by kicking and by opening up his chest and firing heat-seeking missiles. I still don't get it. The missiles were sometimes a pain to deal with, but I found out you could tail whip them out of the way. Nut Varan was one of the easiest of the monster replacements. The same could not be said of Nut Hedorah. Apparently, the source of the horse bats, Nut Hedorah was one of the most Apparently, the source of the horse bats, Nut Hedorah was one of the most aggravatingly difficult monster to fight yet. Mostly because of his special ability. He could shriek and summon a small swarm of those horse bat things. I know there's only 2 in the screen cap, but every time he did this, around 10 would arrive. The AI took advantage of the distraction and attacked twice as fast while the horse bats were flying around. Once that annoyance was dealt over with, I went through a green temple level to kill some enemies to restore my health. Interestingly, none of the horse bats showed up when Nut Hedorah was killed. And that's when I got an idea. If killing all the monsters is what made the red face show up, what would happen if I tried to avoid fighting Orga and went straight to the base? So I gave that a try. There is no monster here. The game told me there was no monster there when I tried to start the base level, and immediately afterward, the game took control of my Godzilla piece and moved it in front of Orga. My little trick didn't work, so I tried to prepare myself for another chase, but first I had to beat Orga. The fight with Orga confirmed another thing. Whoever created this game hack was clearly a Godzilla fan. Not only because they picked a monster like Orga, but they clearly implemented something that happened in Godzilla 2000 in a nearly neat way. Orga's primary attacks were a punch and a heat beam from his shoulder cavity. Once you had to get him down to half his health, he did something new. Would expand his jaws and try to swallow Godzilla, in the process stealing your health and energy. But in doing so, he gave himself a new weakness. Firing a heat beam in his mouth would take a devastating 4 bars off his life meter. When that weakness revealed, I soon beat Orga, and despite how much I had hoped otherwise, the red face had appeared on the map where the base was, and the music stopped. I readied myself the best I could. I started the level, and seeing that it was basically the same as the first, I didn't waste a millisecond before I started hauling ass. I soon encountered obstacles in the form of the ground tiles suspended in the air. Most of them you could jump over or destroy, others you had to crouch under. About 40 seconds in, I heard this horrible bellowing roar, and I saw the spider beast following close behind me. Stacks of obstacles barely slowed it down, and it would back up and then charge its way through them, smashing them into bits. When the smaller obstacles got in its way, it would expand its jaws and swallow them whole. I was afraid, but with fast thinking and faster button pressing, I escaped them once again. I felt really excited, so I laughed and said, "Not this time, asshole." I tried to take a screenshot to celebrate. But when he said that sentence, just before the level ended, the monster did something that made my blood run cold. It looked at me. That wave of mortal terror overtook me again. I sure as hell wasn't laughing anymore. I took another screen cap of the next level title before I rushed to the bathroom to splash some water on my face. and to take a piss that I nearly failed to contain that when that fucking thing looked at me. When I got back into the game, I was getting upset, very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monster looked at me. The game couldn't have heard what I said. That's impossible. It had to be a random occurrence. Why did it happen precisely at the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement monsters, out of place imagery like the green temples, quiz levels, and the red monster chases. It seemed to add up in any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it wasn't funny in any way I could understand, and they had clearly put too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genuine sequel with new Godzilla monsters, then why did they add anything else? Maybe it was some kind of art experiment. Some group project made by a bunch of really talented, crazy people that they lost a cartridge somehow. Or maybe they intended for some random person to find it. It was all fruitless guessing, as far as I could tell. There was only one way to figure out what the deal with the game was, to play it through to the end. Maybe, just maybe there would be something in the credits, an explanation by the creators as to why they did this. Or it could be something much more cryptic and strange. Maybe something even terrifying, or maybe something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the dementia board, I considered replaying Trance to see if the red monster would look at me again. But I decided against it. I wanted to keep moving forward. I was also somewhat worried that backtracking would cause the game to become even more strange. The dementia board music sounded a lot like the Saturn music, although it was slowed down and played with a piano-sounding instrument. Like with most of these new map themes, it had a dangerous and suspenseful feel. When I looked at the music, I looked at the dementia board. There are 4 new boss monsters this time: Space Godzilla, Manda, Gigan, and Baragon. I was surprised there were the 2 new Toho monsters this time, but the best surprise was still to come. I started the quiz level. Here's another list of the results in the same format as the last one. Can you swim? Answer yes, reaction happy. Do you like fish? Answer yes, reaction sick. Can penguins fly? Can penguins fly? Answer no, reaction sad. Can it spin in all directions? There was no clarification of what face meant by it, so I just guessed. Answer no, reaction surprised. Do you breathe oxygen? Answer yes. Reaction weird face number 8. Does it taste good when you bite a woman? I don't know who came up with this question, but I really hope you're getting mental help. Answer no, reaction annoyed. Is it night where you are? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 6. You like cats? Answer yes, reaction reaction confused. Is water wet? Answer yes, reaction angry. Have you ever broken a bone? Answer no, reaction happy. Do you like your job? Answer yes, reaction hurt. And would you like a new monster? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 11. I wasn't entirely sure what face meant by a new monster, but I couldn't resist answering yes just to see what would happen, and the result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board, and I had a new playable monster in the form of the game took me back to the board, and I had a new playable monster in the form of Anguirius. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to play as Anguirius, since he was my second favorite Godzilla monster, and plus I never liked Mothra all that much. I moved my new Anguirius piece over to the level right next to it, eager to test out my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk about Anguirius a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose whether Anguirius stood in a bipedal stance or crawled around on all fours. It wasn't a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles and attacks. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but with no tail whip. Instead, he had something far more interesting: the ability to curl up in a spike ball of death and roll around. It could still take damage, but it was lessened. It was a good way of clearing out stage enemies, but unfortunately doing this also drained the power bar. But the spike ball wasn't his only special ability. When you press start, he would fire a beam of energy from his mouth. It resembled Titanosaurus' sonar attack, and if this were a hack, it may have been inspired by the roar attack by Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also of note, when playing as Anguirius, the level meter gets glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I'd say he's on level 10. Now onto the level. As you might have guessed from the level icon, these levels were green palette swaps of the ground and background tiles from the Blue Mountains. But that immediately caught my attention was the water, which had a transparency effect. Was that even possible for an NES game? I knew the Super Nintendo could do it, but I'd never seen a transparency effect on a game on an NES. The Green Mountains music was played with the same instrument as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was completely different. It was a very simple song with a lot of abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note every few seconds. Anyway, I went through the usual strolling through the level, and again, there were no monsters or anything, but pretty soon I had reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere to go but into the water, so down I went. The water transparency made things a bit harder to see, but it's tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered two new enemies, a giant piranha and some kind of spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha because I could easily tell what it was. It was a sane enemy design that would appear in the real game, and there were very few enemies like this. They didn't take much hits to kill, but they were also annoying, and could considerably trim down your life if you got close enough. They also tend to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeders, they're easy to deal with. They swum around the bottom of the screen towards you and were easily crushed with a roll attack or jumped over. In the screen, you're about to see me about to run one of them over, and there's a pack of piranha behind it. After I beat that level, I moved Godzilla onto the blue castle icon. I started the level and got a title screen with the text, Unforgiving Cold. The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made of blue brick, with rows of identical white statue faces on the walls. These statue faces had a permanent look of horror on their faces. There was also some flickering and static gray static, which didn't really obscure my vision, but it adds to the very unsettling sound of the mood on these levels. This music was a 12-second loop of low-pitched choir vocalizing that sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these levels, I got this sudden, horrible feeling of anxiety. I had the feeling that the farther I progressed through this level, the closer I was getting to something unspeakably evil. There weren't any enemies, but these were some of the longest levels in the game. I only played one level, but it took 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but I realized something playing the Blue Castle level. This game has the power to make the player feel certain things. I don't mean in the sense that you get irritated playing a crappy game. We get unnerved by something scary in the game. What I mean is certain events in the game can instantly make you start feeling something. I know it sounds completely insane. I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe any of this either if I didn't get to play the game myself. But there was something very, very wrong with this game, and I still don't know how to explain it. So then it was time to fight Baragon's replacement. Although Baragon was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. In fact, it was so tall that the ground was noticeably lowered, and not Baragon's head it still barely avoided collision with the bar at the top of the screen, and it was just as frighteningly bizarre as he was huge. You may be wondering how he attacks without arms. Well, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his other fighting technique is much stranger. First, he blasts a cloudy breath of pixels down at you, and which causes you to freeze, and then he walks back to the right corner of the screen and extends a huge Gatling gun from his abdomen. This might seem amusing to you, but it certainly wasn't to me when I was playing the game. This attack is almost as annoying as Gigan's Saw, and not Baragon could have been unbeatable if I constantly used it. Thankfully, he only did it twice when fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me destroy him, and then it was time to play the third level type. I decided that I was going to use Anguirius to fight Manda and Gigan, then fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before getting into the battles, I'll describe the third level type, the Arctic. The Arctic is exactly what you'd guess from the name, an icy tundra with a few watery segments. The music reminded me a bit of Northern Hemispheres in Donkey Kong Country, in 8-bit form. A very dangerous sounding song. It made me think about being trapped in a tundra and freezing to death. There were two new enemies in the stage. The first was a creature frozen in a block of ice. They block your way, and you have to use the heat beam to thaw them out of the ice. They look a bit like a smaller version of Nakazora, only without the eye. When they free, they do a strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't cause any damage, but it's a bit annoying. After dealing with the Iceman, I kept walking for a minute or two, and I came upon a water segment. I jumped in, and this time managed to get a screen cap showing how the water splashes when you jump in. Didn't know how they programmed that, but it's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is how the screen changes when you go underwater. Here you can see another new enemy, the little thing I call the Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly, instantly if you attack them, setting spikes in every direction. The spikes don't do much damage, but they did get me dangerously close to falling in the pit a few times. Oh, speaking of the pits. Down in the water, this game has a platformer element, bottomless pits. There weren't any of these in the original game, and since it was strictly an action game, the pits were a neat addition. After getting him back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Maguma, the Walrus Kaiju. I knew this game had some obscure monsters to begin with, but wow. Not that I'm complaining, it's a very cool cameo for an underappreciated kaiju. Maguma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam and he could charge into you. Not very challenging, but certainly more entertaining than the Matango mini-boss in the original game. One really interesting thing about Maguma is that he doesn't die when you defeat it. He turns tail and retreats. This is the first time I'd ever seen an enemy monster change direction, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but he disappeared after I got in the water. Poor bastard. And that does it for the Arctic. I'll talk about the Amanda fight next. I forgot to mention before, but the music that played during the new monster fights is reused from themes actually in the games. So far, the themes have been Titanosaurus, Gazora's music, Violante, Hidora's music, Orga, Baragon, Maguire's music, Manda, Varen's music, and Space Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla's music. As for the fight, Amanda was a very crafty opponent. When I realized one tactic was ineffective, it would immediately change to a different one. Amanda used a few tricks like spitting fire, biting, and most irritating of all, constricting. It doesn't mercilessly drain your life down like Gigan's Cutter, but is by far Amanda's strongest attack. One thing to note that I found pretty cool is that Atragon showed up during the fight to help me out. Amanda crushed it with ease, but it was still cool. After I slayed Manda, I played through an Arctic level for health power-ups and then was on to Gigan's replacement. When the fight started, I was very confused because there was nothing there. I thought there was going to be like the Titanosaurus fight in Pathos, but around the time it was going back to the map, a piranha appeared on screen. But it wasn't there for long. As soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech, and then Not Gigan flew in and ripped the poor fish to pieces. Well, that's one way to get the player on their toes. The abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me, and it got my adrenaline rushing, which in retrospect was a good thing, because Not Gigan was one of the most fastest and most unrelenting opponents in the game. Not Gigan was tough, but my new skills with Anguirus helped even the score. There was still an incredibly intense fight. Nakigan's attacks consisted of some kind of blood laser that he spews from his mouth and a downward slash. I was expecting some hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was invaluable in defeating him, but I would have taken more screen caps of the fight, but I really had to concentrate. After that, there was just one monster left to take down, Space Godzilla. As mentioned earlier, I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but admittedly a clever idea. Space Godzilla would use his energy to create two flying crystals, which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires not only block you from reaching Space Godzilla, but it also allowed him to constantly recharge to full energy and blast you with a deadly, fully charged Corona beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla would eventually drain his own spires of energy when they shattered, but If you wanted me to do that, well, if you waited for that to happen, you'd probably lose a lot of life. And heat beams actually seem to re-energize the spire, so you had to use physical attacks. When he finally got close to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, hit me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the left corner of the screen, so I only needed to run, and so he can create more spires. Oh, crap, I have to